from via email or text or phone call. And she also works at the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship. And then we also have folks here from the UW School of Medicine, which is why you're all here. And they'll introduce themselves, but we have Amanda, Toby, and Sam, and then Jenya somewhere. And they've generously shared their time to answer questions about what is medical school all about, things that they wish they would have known, what's it all about, essentially, like from the process to actually being in the midst of it. And we're just really glad that we're kind of coming together, and this will be the first of many social hours that we will be putting together, because we just want to give the opportunity for you guys to ask these burning questions so you can start planning your futures and planning towards this. And so I think if you guys could all maybe start over there and just introduce yourself, say your first name and what year you are and study, and what your major is, or if you're undecided.
My name's Connor. I'm a senior in undergrad, and I'm a microbiology major.
My name is Munif. I'm also a senior and a major in microbiology.
My name is Quentin. I'm a third year, and my major is biochemistry.
So my name is Juan. I'm a senior, majoring in biochemistry.
My name is Jessica. I'm a senior. I'm majoring in public health and linguistics.
My name is Angel. I'm a third year, and I'm majoring in biochemistry.
My name is Jasmine. I'm a senior, and I'm studying bioengineering.
Hi, my name is Sam. I'm a MD PhD student. Finished the first 2 years of medical school, and now I'm getting ready to finish up my first year in the PhD.
My name is Zodi. I'm a junior and studying chemistry.
My name is Miriam. I'm a junior. I'm studying biochemistry.
My name is Jocelyn. I'm a senior studying neuroscience.
My name is Brenda. I'm a senior also studying neuroscience.
Anyone on Zoom who wants to?
Yeah, is there anyone who's joining us remotely who's an Opportunity Scholar? And feel free to jump in and introduce yourself. Can you hear us?
Should be able to hear us.
Yeah, we can hear you good.
Oh, hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Do you mind just introducing yourself, saying, well, we know your name, but your year of study and what you're studying?
Yeah, so I am a senior at Pacific Lutheran University, and I'm studying biology.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who is remote? Okay, that's fine.
Introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
So I'm Amanda Cost. I, with Toby, am the co-director of a program called CUSP at the University of Washington School of Medicine. So I'm a family doctor. I work at Harborview, and the CUSP program is designed to support student interest in practicing in urban underserved locations or with urban underserved patients. We have two other students from the CUSP program, hopefully, who are going to be able to make it. Minji, one of our students, is coming from a clinical experience, or no, she's coming from a simulation on the heart. So hopefully she'll be here later today. And then I think another student was going to join us via Zoom, maybe? Hopefully. So someone might join us via Zoom. But for right now, I think Sam and I can hold down the fort. I don't know, Sam, did you prepare any comments or anything like that?
I did it.
You did not? Okay, well then, we thought we would just open it up for questions.
I know some of you already have some, so. Oh, yeah.
I was wondering why you went the MD PhD route instead of just MD. Like, what's your background?
All right, dive in deep. So why the MD PhD and not MD?
Yeah.
So I think during my undergraduate career, I spent a lot of time in the lab doing research. In fact, I think the entire time I started and immediately got a position in a lab. And actually during my first year, I hated it. I was like, what is this? Like, who does this? And I spoke to my mentors and they said, give it a try. Yeah, I know you're interested in medicine, but, give this one good shot. And then if it doesn't work out, then, continue on your way towards medical school. So I did, and things just started to click for me, and I really enjoyed working in the lab and had a project, and I really just felt like I thrived in that environment. alongside that experience, I was also volunteering in the clinic and really enjoyed that as well. So when it came time to apply, it was a difficult decision, but ultimately I really wanted to take time to develop as a scientist and to be able to use that moving forward in my career. And while I think there are opportunities in medical school to do research, you don't have the opportunity to, do a PhD. It's designed to train you to be a physician, and that's what that training period is for. So I just couldn't reason how I would be able to do the things that I ultimately want to do without having a firm grasp in science and being able to ultimately, work as a physician scientist in whatever capacity that, I ultimately choose. So that was kind of my rationale for the MD PhD, is that I'd have dedicated time to do research.
Thanks.
I think it's also important to know that probably your career trajectory would be different than my trajectory as someone who just went through the straight MD program. So most folks that go through an MD PhD program, like, you're going to go on and be a physician scientist, which means that you'll probably have a clinical practice, you'll see patients, you'll do some sort of clinical work. But a large part of most folks who go along the physician scientist route is to then do research, to get grants and to do kind of basic science. So either kind of the things that you all are studying right now, immunology, microbiology, neurosciences, that sort of thing. Folks will do basic science research in addition to having their clinical practice. So that's not something, so I just went through the straight MD program. I would not be able to graduate and be like, I'm going to go out and make myself a microbiome lab, right, and start running it and see patients too. So I think folks that definitely want to go down that path differentiate themselves pretty early in terms of like figuring things out. I have known one student who in the middle of medical school was like, you know what, I made a mistake. I should have been an MD PhD student. And she actually figured out a way to apply to a PhD program within the University of Washington, and so she's just taking a pause to do it. So it's not like if you don't choose correctly, you're totally sunk, but I think most people kind of know going into that, are they going to focus more on a clinical career where they're taking care of patients, or are they really interested in this basic science? And is that fair?
I think that's a great assessment. And also there's flexibility, right? You're not cornered into making that decision that you will be a physician scientist and run your own lab and spend time in clinic. I think that's the trend. But there are plenty of folks who decide, I want to do 80% clinic and 20%, translational clinical research. And so, I think it's true that early on you do sort of set yourself up for that sort of ideal. But as time goes on, as I'm learning, my interests are evolving.
Sam, I'm curious. Would you mind sharing just your story to medicine, sort of how you got the idea, and just kind of an overview of how you got to where you are now?
Sure, absolutely. So let's see where to begin. I'm first to college and to graduate with a bachelor's degree in my family.
Maybe some of you don't know what that's like.
So I think already I felt like there was, so that experience alongside witnessing health disparities in my own community sort of prompted me to want to be that change. And so I always sort of was intrigued by the lack of healthcare professionals who reflect the diversity in my community, but also the health disparities that exist because access to healthcare is not equitable. And so for me, that was sort of a starting point into medicine. No one in my family, of course, is has an MD, but there were nurses in my family, both vocational and RN, and so I was exposed to medicine in that sense. But that's sort of what sparked the interest in me early on. When I got to college, I was okay. I think I want to be a doctor, and then going to an advisor and being told like this is what all the things that you need to do, and I for one was very overwhelmed with all of those sort of the prerequisites and all of the extracurriculars, and you hear about all of this stuff that this cookie cutter image that a pre-med has to sort of assume in order to get into medical school. So those are things that being first to college and wanting to be a doctor, dreaming big, as we were discussing earlier, those are things that sort of was a common theme throughout my education. And when I had the experiences both in the clinic and outside the clinic, it just felt right. Felt like this is my way to be a change agent. And I think, of course, there are many other avenues one can take to be a change agent. But for me, it just made sense that I wanted to go into medicine so that way I could affect change. So that's a little bit of my background. Yeah.
What are you doing a PhD in, Sam?
Yeah, so I'm doing a PhD in genomics. And genomics is it's really sort of a new field, I think, relative to sort of molecular biology, which is also would be new to somebody who's a physicist or chemist, but genomics kind of takes an interdisciplinary approach to study questions that ultimately sort of are rooted in how the genome impacts health, how the genome impacts development. And it takes biology, takes chemistry, takes biochemistry, and computer science to sort of really understand what the genome is and how it impacts human health and disease. So that's where my PhD is in, and it's great. It's fun. It's I get to do experiments. I get to do my own analysis and coding and sort of bringing all that together into one umbrella is really neat. So that's what my PhD is.
Introduce yourself.
Sure. Sorry for running late, guys. Hopped on the bus as soon as I could down from Harbor View. I'm a first-year medical student. I went to UW for undergrad, majored in public health. So not quite as sciencey as a lot of my classmates, but I just love the systems approach that public health has, and really recognizing structures and just sort of other things that we need to think about besides just an individual person's health. And there's so much going on around it and how that affects. I don't really know what we're going into, but yeah, I like picking chestnuts. I like hiking. I like baking. I think baking is the closest thing to magic you can get. Just throw things together and boom, cookies. Yeah. I'm in the CUSP program as well. I don't know if that's been introduced to you guys, but it's focused on urban underserved areas and what it means to practice medicine there and how best to serve communities as not only a physician, but also as a community advocate and partner. And that's something that I'm trying to figure out, is how not to just be a really good doctor, but also outside of clinic walls, how do I advocate for patients and make their lives healthier and more flourishing based on what they truly need and want. Yeah. But I'm just a first year, so I've been about a quarter and a half here. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah.
Then they were just asking questions, so.
Oh, okay.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the CUSP program and kind of like how is it different than just like normal med school with
Jenny looking at me. I want to give the bare bones, and I can give my bit of experience on it after.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenya. So Toby and Amanda are the co-directors of CUSP, and I'm the program manager. So the way that we've designed CUSP is not that it is wholly different from the rest of the medical school, but it's a program where we sort of tailor your experiences within the required curriculum so that you get maximum exposure to urban underserved patients and clinical experiences. And so it's not like it's fully separate. Our students are fully integrated into the medical school, but there are certain required components of their curriculum along the way. And we say, we're going to make sure you do that in an urban underserved clinic. So for example, all of the first year students do a primary care practicum. So every other Wednesday, they spend a full day in a primary care clinic seeing patients. And we make sure that they are at a clinic that is like a community health center, as opposed to like a private practice that mostly sees privately insured patients. All of our students are specifically placed at clinics where they're going to see the kinds of patients that they eventually want to serve. And then we teach 2 courses during their first year and a half of medical school that are focused on health inequities, health disparities, structural determinants of health, a little more of that sort of public health perspective like Minji was talking about. So those classes are open to all medical students, but our students are required to take them. So it's not that we've created an entirely separate program for them. We just sort of curate their experiences so that throughout medical school, repeatedly over their 4 years, they're getting exposure to urban underserved clinical environments.
Yeah. I would say that I just recently started the program a few months ago, but so far it's been really incredible. I'm at Harborview Family Medicine for my PCP, so every other Wednesday I spent the whole day in the clinic there, and I love it so far. It's incredible. One thing I really like is the being able to be exposed to a team setting, which I really see myself in. So not only are there MAs and nurses and doctors, but there's also like right there a social worker, like mental health, and it's really integrated. So if they find that, you know, one patient is high risk for like suicide ideation or depression, then they can immediately tag that person and bring them in. And that just sort of clinical setting is, that sort of team is where I want to be. So already getting exposure to that. When you're not in the program, it's sort of an open bag of where you are. Also, like the patient population is exactly the types of communities that I want to be involved in. My first day, I already had like 2 phone interpreter interviews. So I had to do interviews over a phone interpreter and like utilize different skills on how do I communicate, how do I utilize summarizing, and really like being able to communicate in other ways with patients that English isn't their first language, and those sorts of like practices that, you know, some of my classmates aren't exposed to because they're in a very private setting, and so a lot of their patients are coming in for very different needs. So it's sort of a leg up if you kind of know what sort of direction you want to go into and want more practice around that.
She has to say that because she's at my clinic.
Also, yes, I see Dr. Cost a lot there. I do a good job.
You did a great job. You make it sound like it's a great place to work, which it is. The other thing too that we have is it's not just the way medical school is set up is that there's a preclinical phase. So that's what Sam and Minji, Sam's completed the preclinical phase, Minji's in it right now. So that's basically like kind of a little bit more like college, but a lot harder. So your biochemistry course that you took, they cover it in 1 day, right? Here. So the pace is a lot faster in terms of what you learn. And then
maybe 4 days.
Maybe 4 days. And then after you complete that phase, which in our school is about 18 months, then you go on to a clinical phase where you rotate through the core specialties of medicine. And so in our school, there is this, you still have patient contact in the preclinical phase, but in the clinical years, in the clerkships, we make sure that our students go to critical clerkships where we think it's important for them to be placed in clinics or at settings that serve urban underserved patients. So they'll do a rotation at Swedish Cherry Hill at the Family Medicine Clinic, which is a federally qualified health center, or an FQHC lookalike, so community health center. They will do some of their psychiatry at Harborview, which sees, folks that are involuntarily detained because of severe mental illness. And there's a large burden of mental illness among urban underserved folks. And then they'll also do surgery because oftentimes folks delay care, and you will see what happens when folks are not able to access the care that they need, surgical problems or trauma or other sorts of things at Harborview. And so that's designed to build on the skills that you're getting in your first 18 months to continue those skills later. And there's some other extra things that you do in your fourth year, and we try to get them together so that they can talk about their experiences and whatnot.
Yeah, and Sam is on our advisory board for CUSP because sadly, we did not start CUSP early enough to get Sam in the program.
I'm living vicariously through.
Yeah, so we recruited Sam to our advisory board, so he gives us advice on our programming. He's an honorary CUSP member.
At least I like to.
Oh yeah, I just heard about a trust program. So how different is the CUSP program to the trust? Because I know they both serve the underserved communities, so I just want to know what the differences are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, so the trust program is really rurally oriented. So it's a workforce issue to develop students to work in rural settings, and that roughly means a population of 50,000 and below. And the CUSP program is for urban underserved. So we're looking at sort of the Seattle metropolitan area primarily at this point. So our medical school is large, and we have campuses in other states. We call WWAMI. And the CUSP program is just for the Seattle campus. The trust program is actually in all 6 campuses. So there's a little distinction there.
And you can't do both, right? So the trust program is designed for, and it's specifically, I think the goal is to recruit students from a rural background who want to serve in a rural community. And then we are designed for students who come from an urban background who want to serve an urban community. And so the requirements of the program would bump into each other in such a way that you couldn't do both. But they both, I think, overall have a similar mission of addressing these workforce shortages for patients where there's critical need and not enough physicians to meet the demand. So there's the rural track and the urban track, and we certainly learned a lot from Trust and sort of adapted pieces. I'm pointing at Toby because Toby's involved in Trust. So we certainly took some of their best practices and adapted them for what we're doing, but the programs are run entirely separately.
And just to give you a perspective, we admitted 4 CUSP students this year out of the Seattle class of 100. So it's a smaller program. The trust program and the Seattle campus admitted 4 students as well. So both are fairly small portions of the total class in the Seattle campus.
Yeah.
So follow-up question about trust. When you do your clinical, do you do it in like rural areas then, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So Trust has a unique longitudinal clerkship that the Trust students engage in their clinical phase, but they also have contact with that same site during their sort of academic phase in the first year and a half of school. So you have sort of this longitudinal relationship with a preceptor out in a specific community.
Can I ask you all a question? How many of you are putting together an application for medical school? 1, 2. Who's thinking about putting an application for medical school? Gonna guess maybe some of the rest of you. Okay, what advice do you have for these folks?
What do you wish someone had told you when you were like preparing your first application?
Don't spread yourself in. Start managing your time now and start to sort of triage all your extracurriculars. So that way you actually have time to focus on the different aspects of the application, be it the MCAT, personal statement, getting those letters of recommendation, finishing up your classes strong. So all of those things I think are really important. At least I wish I sort of wasn't doing 10 different things when I was applying, because I think it would have just been, at the very least, manage my stress levels. And so that's one advice.
I wish somebody had told me early on, you can do it. You can really do it. And I think sometimes it's easy to get sidetracked with, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing research, my grades, blah, blah, blah. But like, honestly, if it's something that you believe that there is nothing else out there but medicine, and you are so convinced and you are so passionate, you will make it. It's just a matter of how long it'll take you or what extra steps you might have to take, but you can get there. For me, what was really helpful was being very intentional about what you're doing and why you're doing it. So why am I volunteering here versus another place? Why this community versus another community? And like the deeper that you really like dig into like that question of why, like what makes you excited, what gives you energy, what motivates you, what change do you want to see, then it'll actually come out across in your application as like passion and like really this is the place for you. Yeah, being intentional was helpful, and also it helps maybe prune as to what's most important. So, you know, I started off pretty wide. I did like lots of different volunteering. I also had work, so I had to make money. I also tried research out, and I also did non-medical volunteering. And then over time, I really saw what I was drawn to. I quickly discovered that research, bench research at least, was not for me. And so, you know, it's okay to let things go and focus your attention and time on things that really make you excited and that like really speak to your skills, and then go with it, you know, really invest in that. My volunteering that I had, I kept over like 4 years. And just because I loved it, and I just continued. And then from there, you know, being able to rise and like leadership is also great if you can do that. But yeah, I would say, yeah, be very like, ask yourself, why am I doing this? And if it's truly for like, I don't know, the love of it sounds so cheesy, but that's what will help you keep going. Yeah, because it's a tough process. It is a long process, but you guys can definitely do it. Yeah.
Question, did you guys take gap years or did you not? And like, is there anything you regret not, like anything you would have done before medical school or like done differently before applying or after you applied?
So I took gap years, and I think Toby may have also something to say about that as from the sort of medical admissions perspective. But for MD, PhD,
Sorry, the
it's,
door locked on that.
if you do take gap years, it's highly recommended or expected that you will endeavor yourself in research. And so when I finished undergrad, I wasn't ready to apply to medical school. And I knew I was passionate about medicine and research. So, and I knew I wanted to do an MD, PhD. So I took time off to do research. So I took 3 years off. And during that time, I was able to work on several projects. I had opportunities to drive those projects independently. Also was able to publish. So it was a great opportunity to distance myself from the coursework and really focus on science. So that's what I did during my gap years. I also spent time studying for the MCAT. I did some volunteering, and then really kept it to just those things. And I think the whole bit on being intentional, like that was my opportunity to like, okay, did all these things in undergrad, but you know what, like, let's really focus in and pursue what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I also took 2 gap years. I wanted to apply as soon as I graduated from college. That was the path that I set myself on, and like that's what I was gonna do. But as I was like trying to get my application together, I was like, I just was not feeling it. And I was like discovering that there were still questions, at least in my own head, of is this truly medicine like 100%? Or is it just 99? Or have I truly discovered or like looked into everything else that I would want to do? Because medicine's a hard path. I think like it's not just something like, oh, I could do that, or I could do something else. Like at least for me, I had to be fully convinced. And so during my gap year, I did AmeriCorps at a federally qualified health center, and it was the type of setting that I imagined myself working in already, the type of medicine I'd want to do. And the actual work that I did was a mix of like public health, outreach, as well as some clinical work, which is awesome. So I got to sort of tailor that. And it was through that year that I think I really got convinced that it was medicine. The parts of my job that I was so excited about and would stay like 50, 60-hour weeks for was the health coach program, where I got to partner with one really medically and socially complex patient that just faced a lot of barriers to their care, and basically journey with them throughout the year and like work on their health goals. And you know, I got to work with her on her diabetes and see her A1C drop, and like get her excited about exercising and being able to like bridge the gap because she didn't have access to like healthy foods, and so getting her signed up for different programs. So I think it was in that process that I was like really convinced on medicine. I also wanted to see other sides of clinics, so I worked at different clinics as well, and I also am really passionate about community organizing, and so I took that time off to teach classes here at UW on community organizing, as well as work on some campaigns, which was a very interesting time with Trump getting elected as well, timing-wise. But it was it was definitely incredibly fulfilling. I wouldn't take those 2 years back for anything. And then when I got into medical school, I quit my job and then went traveling for 2 months, which is a very privileged thing to do. But if you have the opportunity to travel before, make time for yourself as well, because once school starts, there's no break. So I'm realizing.
So I'll offer a counterpoint. I went straight through, but I am also someone who, like, I knew I was going to be a doctor when I was 10, right? And it's like, no one's going to stop me, right? Like, I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
So I entered undergraduate knowing that this is what I was going to do, got great advice from mentors around pruning, making sure that I was prepared in terms of timing of the MCAT, that sort of thing. So I was ready to go, out of college and to go in. And I went back and forth about whether or not, should I take a year off? Should I do other things? I think gap years, I started medical school in 2001, so it wasn't quite as common to do gap years then as I think it is now. But there were some folks in my school that had taken time off either for research or had been unsure about whether or not this path was for them. So I do think that the most important thing is what Minji is talking about. You have to be absolutely sure that this is what you want to do for the rest of your life, because it's like the best thing to do, and it's also one of the hardest jobs that there is out there. So, I think it's, and medical school is not easy, right? It's totally doable, but it is hard. So if you come and you're like, well, I'm not 100% sure about this, it's going to be a miserable experience. You need to be like committed heart and soul and ready to go, right? You think that's fair? I don't know if your classmates probably don't tell us if they're not super happy about their choice, because they're in too deep right now. But you do need to be ready. And then the other thing that I would say is having, gone straight through, and then usually people don't take time off after you're done, right? Like once you graduate from medical school, there's this process within your 4th year where you you match to a residency. It's a whole nother application process. It's kind of like getting into a fraternity or sorority in the sense that like they rank you, you rank them. There's a big computer algorithm that figures it out. There's this one day where you open this envelope and find out where you're going to spend the next 3 to 7 years of your life. It's kind of weird. But there's not a lot of time off in residency either, right? Like that's your job. You're working 80 hours a week wherever you go. And depending on what field you go in, that could be 3 to 7 years. Now that you may be adding that up and you're going to be like, wow, when I'm done, I'm going to be in my mid-30s. And that sounds super old to you right now, but it's not that bad because there are many peers that I've had that after they finished residency, a lot of my residency classmates did a lot of super fun things. So one person went to go work in New Zealand because New Zealand has all these locums, like this kind of not volunteer, but temporary doctoring that you can do. So she went and she did that, and then actually ended up working. She now works at an Indian Health Service site in Arizona and has been there for 10 or 12 years now. But did some kind of temporary work for a couple of years while she traveled and did other things before she went to go get her more permanent job. And then people kind of design their careers in a variety of ways. Like some people just don't work full time when they're done. They'll work like what you're saying, maybe they'll do 80% or something like that. And then they have other time to either advocate or pursue other sorts of things. So like, yes, it's a lot of years when you add it up, but then when you add up like the 30 years you have to work after you're done with everything, like that time goes by comparatively slowly. Just think about how fast college went. It probably went pretty fast for most of you. Med school and residency goes even faster, right? Well, maybe not. you really So there's no one right path.
Toby, did you want to give a comment on your opinion on gap years?
I think these are, you guys covered it really well. I think the majority of students that apply to UW do take gap years. It's totally common, but it's also fine if you know what you want to do. You have everything together to apply. Falling straight through college into medical school. I would say, if you do a gap year, it's been said by Minji, but follow your passion, try to get outside of your comfort zone, do things that, you've wanted to do, test out things that you've been talking about doing in your future career. This is a time to figure those things out a little bit more. And I think, that can be helpful when you go to your into medical school, with a little bit more experience in your belt and a little bit stronger vision for where you want to go with your career.
And I think especially for CUSP, we look at students who have interesting and compelling experience outside of a classroom, right? Whether that's because they took time off between undergrad and medical school and were doing something really interesting, or during their undergrad career, they had a really robust volunteer portfolio, or they were. So for us, the kinds of students that are really compelling are students who sort of know what they care about, and it's because they've had this range of experiences, right? So I don't think any of the students in CUSP came straight from undergrad. It's not to say we wouldn't consider them, certainly.
I think you did. Didn't you come straight from?
I think he took a year off. I think he graduated. I don't know. I could be wrong. We can look. Yeah, I think he did AmeriCorps for a year. But I think the thing that we really like is students who have sort of a well-rounded perspective of why medicine, right? And it's not just because somebody told them, like, you better grow up and be a doctor, right? And they felt sort of shoved into it. It's because they've spent time thinking critically about, what do I want to be in the world? What kind of change do I want to affect? And I've come to understand, like Minji was saying, that medicine is the way that I want to do that, right? So I think for our students, most of the students who've taken a gap year or multiple years weren't actually doing research. I was thinking about that when you were talking about this. And I was like, I don't know if any of our students really did research in their time off. Most of them were working in more of like a public health practice. One of them worked in a shelter for women who were in recovery. One of them was a case manager at a local homeless shelter. One of them actually worked at the simulation lab at Harborview. So they have a pretty interesting mix of experiences. So I think for us, the question is not whether or not you took a gap year. It's what have you been doing outside of the classroom that's helping to sort of bolster what you're learning in the classroom, and how has that helped you figure out what your path looks like. Right? Because like for me, I figured out pretty early that I should not be a doctor. That is not the path for me. I would be a terrible physician. I'm going to go to public health school. right? And that worked out really well for me. I would not have done well in medical school. And I think knowing that about myself is also kind of what we look for in our students, right? We want to make sure that they've given a lot of thought and intention to this because it's a big commitment. So I don't know how helpful any of that is, but we can certainly try to, if folks are like, nah, I'm in this, let me know and I will find you a student who is in the medical school now, who came straight through, who I'd be happy to connect you with if that's where you are in your path.
A lot of the students in advising hours will ask me about whether or not, what's the value of doing a post-bac? And I wonder if anyone could comment on that, what a post-bac is, what should they be looking for in a quality post-bac experience that could be influential in launching and retaining in medical school?
So I can take a shot at that one. So post-bac is, taking credits after you graduate from your undergrad. And most people take post-bac before they go into medical school as a way to sort of demonstrate their ability to achieve good grades in school. Sometimes students will go through undergrad with not a great record of science or not enough credits of science. And then they can go and do a post-bac and they can demonstrate that they have the ability to sort of go through this rigor of medicine and take the courses and be successful in medical school. So there is, depending on what school you're applying to, some people will look at where you did your post-bac, and so you have to sort of be cognizant of that. But that's sort of the general gestalt of how people use post-bac in their application, at least. Now, there are also, people might use post-bac to explore other career paths or specialties. So
There are also research post-bac programs through the National Institutes of Health, and those are quite popular among potential medical students. I know there was a handful in our class. I'm sure there's always a handful every year who have done those. So, if you haven't, on the flip side, if you haven't done research and you want to venture into that area, that would be an opportunity to consider.
Are those common among folks who have taken like a bigger gap and who are sort of like, oh, I got an undergraduate degree in a social science and didn't do a lot of science, but now I want to apply to med school, but it's been 5 years? Can those folks do?
Yeah. Yeah, so people do it for all kinds of reasons, and a lot of it, like I said, they're either sort of making up for credits that they didn't do in their undergraduate to qualify for medical school, or they're sort of establishing themselves as sort of a better student than their grades showed when they were in undergrad. So either way works, and those things can be done at community colleges. It's very common for people to go to community college to get those post-bac credits are cheaper, or they can do post-bac at universities.
Yeah, and there are some formal, like Sam is saying, there are some formal actual post-bac programs where you take classes and then you also get some extra experiences. So I would say you do want to, first of all, you don't want to overpay, right? Like if you're going to do this, probably better to do it at a community college or at a state institution that is not going to have the financial implications of a private institution, or I don't know if these programs that you're talking about offer any stipend or support or.
So the research ones are usually fully paid. And actually there's one here at the University of Washington, there's a few throughout the country at tier 1 research institutions. And then there's one at the NIH. So those are all paid for. They pay you essentially. So it's a really sweet gig. And then the other ones, the formalized post-bacs, which are either to enhance your GPA or to sort of take the pre-med coursework because you were an economics major or something. Yeah, those tend to be, there usually aren't any financial aid like incentives other than you get loans, and they tend to be pretty expensive. So I agree. If you're feeling you need to take more coursework for whatever reason, taking it at a community college or somewhere else, state institutions, would be great. And are those looked upon any differently than?
Not at University of Washington, but I think that other schools do. I'd also say, find out what from medical schools, what they're looking for in terms of GPA and MCAT. Sometimes chat rooms can be wrong, so I wouldn't rely on that. And you may not need to do post-bac work if your sort of grades are, within our threshold of acceptance. So just be thinking about that when determining whether or not you want to do post-bac.
I think it's good to have a post-bac backup plan. So when I applied, I don't know about all of you, like I went to college, I had no idea what I was doing. I was like a terrible student for a good 3 semesters. And so I like really had to get it together like later on to be like, I'm going to be capable of this. And so when I went to my pre-health advisor, she was like, you might get into one medical school if you're lucky, so it took me a while to kind of get my stride. And so I had a backup plan in place around like, what was I going to do? Was I going to stay like where my university was? Was I going to, do more credits there? Was I going to go back home, stay with my parents, that sort of thing? Like what was going to be the next step if I didn't get in? Now, this is where like the passion comes into, because like I may not have looked super great on paper, but if you go and you demonstrate, like I had done a lot of stuff with my university, had its own emergency medical response, and I had done a ton of work with them. And I showed up and I was like, there's this great thing that I've done, and I'm super passionate. I wanted to do this since I was 10. And so folks will be like, you're only going to get into 1 or 2 schools, and I'm going to do 4. So I kind of want to go back and be like, told you so. So don't believe the folks that are also, like definitely be passionate, reach for the stars. If you can articulate yourself well, when you go to interview about like why you're drawn to this, why you want this to be your life's work, then, I definitely have a backup plan, like if you are going to need to take a gap year and do some extra studies. But I wouldn't necessarily like familiarize yourself with what the school wants, but don't sell yourself short either. So.
And so conversely is true. So don't just think that if I have great grades, then I'm a shoo-in for med school. So in most universities, there's sort of holistic admissions, and they do their best to sort of make sure that the students are capable of getting through medical school academically, but they're looking for experience, they're looking for passion, they're looking for sort of understanding of things like social determinants of health and the complexity of medicine these days. So there's all different matrix, you have to consider. And, I think some students just think it's all about getting, excellent grades, and that's part of it, but not all of it.
That was something I was wondering for, like, who did you talk to when you were putting your application together? Who gave you advice? And where did you find those people?
Networking is really important, and having mentors, really good mentors, is key. And I was very fortunate to have to be the beneficiary of both good networking and mentors. And so I utilize those all throughout the application. My letters of recommendation came from those mentors as well. So I feel like for the letters of recommendation, those people should know you really, really well. And they should, of course, advocate on your behalf. If you have any shadow of a doubt that like they're not going to write you the best letter, then like don't even bother. So like for me, those people, my letter writers were my mentors, and many of them were not MD, PhDs, or MDs. Many of them were PhDs, and I did have MDs as well. And they all sort of helped me with various aspects of the application. When I, going through different rounds of editing with my personal statement, I would hand in my what I had at that point, and they would line by line go through it and give me detailed comments about what I should change and word choice and all of that. So like I used my mentors for all aspects of the application. Advice on MCATs. Like should I take the old or the new? For me, it was like I had that choice to take the old or the new, and they said, well, like, are you ready to take the old? Because the old is like expiring in like a few months, and if not, why put yourself through that and prepare yourself, to take the new MCAT. Who cares? Yes, it's like twice as long now, and there are some incentives to take the old, but I needed to sort of have that input, and then I think the interviewing process, that was key. I did like mock interviews, and that was helpful. There are these multiple mini interviews at med schools now, and I felt like I had for 9 out of 10, I was like, at my interviews, I was like doing these MMIs, and when I was told like they were just rolling them out, and so familiarize yourself with the interview process at the schools that you apply to, and the way to do that is to reach out to folks, network with people at various medical schools if you have contacts, email, find out what's the structure of the interview like. So I think all of those things during the time of my application, I was just using all resources available to me, but my mentors were key.
Yeah, mentors are pretty crucial. I think for me, I had a bit more trouble finding mentors. It wasn't like a very easy process. In addition, I didn't really have any like doctors in my kind of circle of social networks. So that was also like difficult of like, oh, I don't even know who to shadow. And so I think what really helped me was like kind of just like gritting my teeth and like networking. I do not like networking. I don't know. It's really hard for me. But basically, one of my main mentors was a professor. I took her class and I loved her class. And then I had like a requirement to do an extra project through the honors program. And so I was like, can I do my project with you? And so I worked with her over the course of the next few quarters. And then after that, I just continued to meet up with her and then like continue that sort of research that we did together. So that was really nice. Also, yeah, you can be open to like who your mentors can be, and not all of them have to be an MD, although, it's helpful to have at least one or two. Another main mentor of mine was just somebody at my church that has known me for a long time, but it's also in the medical field. And she was like a big person that helped me like with my personal statement. And then when I was volunteering at Swedish Hospital, there was a doctor who came in, and usually they like kick the volunteers out. They're like, okay, the doctor's here now. But this doctor was actually like very open, and she was like, oh, like come here and let's ask this patient if it's okay if you listen to their heart. And like that was the first time as a volunteer, because all I did was like, more on the comfort side of patients, nothing clinical, that like a doctor sort of did that. And so, afterwards I just went up to her and I was like, can I shadow you? Can you be my mentor, basically? And to this day, we still keep in touch. And so, yeah, don't be afraid to go up to people and just ask and talk to them. Almost 100% of the time, they are so open and willing to do that. But also making that initial step can be hard, and where to find mentors can be difficult. And that way you just have to, like Sam was saying, just email and put yourself out there, go to new situations, like talk to Dr. Koss, like that kind of thing. And you'll find them slowly. And yeah, in terms of letters of recommendation, this is the advice I give to everybody. about 5 people. Choose about 5 people to send your, oh wait, sorry, no, this is about the application, sorry. In terms of your application, send it to only 5 people, and I sent them mainly to my mentors, but also to people who know you well and know you in different contexts. So I sent it to 2 doctors, like a family friend, my sister, my volunteer coordinator, and that way people who know you in sort of a different context but can give you different perspectives is really helpful. And not sending it to too many people, because with that there can be a lot of opinions and your voice can get sort of drowned out or lost. So it's important to keep still the integrity of your voice in that. And sorry, going back to letters of recommendation, kind of similar advice of finding people who really know you and know you in different contexts is really helpful. And what I did is I actually printed out the AAMC. There's like 25 core competencies that they expect of every medical student. So, you know, like curious and like respectful and all of these things. And what I did is for each letter writer, I highlighted like 2 or 3 things for them to highlight in my application, as well as gave examples of that. So
This is how you do it.
like,
That is a golden nugget.
be very clear, because a lot of times you ask for a strong letter and they're like, sure, and then they just sort of like, oh, I know Minji from blah, blah, blah. But if you are like, I really want you to highlight, like, in my volunteer, like, interactions, how I really showed, like, compassion and blah, blah, and speak to that. Obviously, you shouldn't ask for things that they can't speak to, but if you give them that as well as examples, it just makes it a lot easier for them and gives them more specific ways to talk about you in the way that you want. And so for each letter writer, they each touched on different things, so it shows that like I'm a well-rounded person, as well as if there's overlap, that's okay. But yeah, and then also a lot of my letter writers were really awesome, and they wanted to meet me before writing the letter, and just like being able to touch base, see each other in person, and like being able to talk over and like get to know each other more as people is really helpful. Because I mean, you do know your professors and that kind of thing, but getting to in a one-on-one situation is more helpful, I would say, in order to making that connection.
Awesome. I have 2 comments really quickly. We just have a few minutes left till 6:30, so want to be sure that if you guys have any burning questions, ask them now. But then also back to the mentorship thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't plug this, but WSOS does have a mentorship program. So, you know, in their situation, maybe it was harder to find a mentor, but being a part of the Opportunity Scholarship, you're actually really lucky that we have mentors that are available, and we're partnering with the UW School of Medicine to even get more mentors from them next year. And so definitely, like, if you're not, sorry for those who are graduating now, but if you're going to be a student here next year, take one of those little flyers on your way out, and you'll receive more information from us. You can look forward to that.
And I have a small addendum that relates to a comment you made and Sam made, is that these mentors, they really are buying into your success strategy. Don't say goodbye to a mentor just because you've done something transactional. They really love to hear from you. If you've made a rewarding relationship, a mentor could be your ally for many years to come. And they're going to be really excited to hear back from you, no matter where your journey is going next. And so don't forget, if a connection's been made, to honor that later on. It doesn't have to happen a lot, but it's super to stay connected, and there's value that comes to you.
Are there any last questions?
I will happily volunteer that if you are about to graduate and are looking for a physician mentor, please let me know. I would be happy to, we have like hundreds of them across the Northwest. I'd be happy to try to help you connect with someone if you're looking for something specific in a physician.
And do you have time this evening to stay back and talk to students?
Yeah, for a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're like, I am really interested in a family physician in Seattle who's Somali, like, I will try to find you one. Yeah, totally.
I wish I had you, Jenya.
And then Toby, I am gonna put you on the spot because you said you should ask a department what their bands are for admissions in terms of GPA and test scores. So here we are.
Yeah, so for, like I said, for UW, we try to do holistic admissions, and so tend to have a threshold of 50% of, let's see, so an MCAT score of 506 would be, I think, a 50 percentile for UW. We have accepted people as low as like 497 or so. In terms of the national percentile would be like around like, I don't know, like 25 percentile. So we do have a range. In terms of GPA, we look at this, we look at the overall GPA, but we do focus a little bit more on the science courses. And within the science courses, we tend to think like a 3.5 would be fine. We have more discussions if somebody has like a 3.2 in the science courses. Postbacks are amazing in terms of redeeming your GPA. So if you feel like, oh gosh, I'm not there, I'm not going to be there by the time I graduate, there's opportunities for you to show and demonstrate that you have the ability to be successful in that. So I'm giving sort of ranges because we don't have any hard and fast sort of rules on this, but there are sort of, those are some sort of guidelines, I guess.
Do you guys have any questions about that?
Yeah. Do you look at a grade trend? So let's say you did poorly in one grade, but then you did very well in the last quarter of a sequence. How would you judge grade trends?
Yeah, great question. So we do look for upward trajectories. So, if you had, if we show sort of growth throughout undergrad, we also take into account if you're working, if you had sort of medical issues, if you had something going on with your family or whatever, and you had sort of some dips in GPA, those are all sort of can be explained on your application. So that's, yeah, so that we kind of look for you to sort of be rising in your GPA in general.
I have a question just on like, you said you like look at holistic stuff. How important is it to look at, like, if you're working or something and that cuts down your volunteering time, or if it cuts down other stuff?
Yeah.
Like, do you take that into consideration, or like, how much volunteering do you need, or do you need?
Yeah. So absolutely. So we do take into account if you're working. There are people who get admitted who don't have any service during their undergrad because they were working and they just didn't have time because they needed to keep up their grades and they're working, and that can all be explained. I would say that it's helpful to have sort of a passion that you're involved with. And so I think admissions committees become skeptical if we see you do like 5 hours in like 10 different activities, and then you don't really have much to say in the interview about your service work. So even if you're working and so forth, think about making just a little bit of time over a period of years at a particular, service organization. That speaks volumes. So to have dedication, and then, build these relationships, and maybe you'll have a letter from them of recommendation to really sort of showcase, your commitment to service and how you perform in service-oriented organizations.
And we talk about this a lot with CUSP and the recognition that sometimes a lot of volunteerism is more a marker of privilege than it is of anything else, right? And just like having the ability to like go on 6-week-long mission trips, which is like good for you, but not everyone can do that, right? And so we also encourage our students to think creatively about like, what have you been doing outside of a classroom that might benefit your community, whether or not you think of it as formal volunteerism, right? Like, are you active in your church and like teaching Sunday school? Well, not everybody thinks of that as volunteerism, but if that's really important to you and it's a thing that you're doing with your time, then we value that. Are you the primary caretaker for a grandparent? Like, we value that, right? And that's a service you're providing, but you wouldn't necessarily think of it as volunteerism, right? So we encourage students to think about, it's not just about like, I am at the food bank for this many hours every week. That's great and that's important, and not everyone can do that. So if there are things that you're doing in your family, in your community, in spaces that are like not academic and you're not being compensated with credit or money or whatever, that's okay. We just want to know, how are you spending your time when you're out in the classroom? Because there's a good chance you're doing something valuable with your time. It just might not look like, you know, I volunteered in this place doing these things. Okay. Thank you.
Sam, Angie, any closing comments on how it's going so far? And is it the rush of life you're hoping it's going to be?
Well, I think being an MD PhD student, you go through, there's quite a few transitions that you maneuver through. There's, well, starting medical school, which you do with all of your other classmates. Then there's backing away from medical school, and then starting a PhD, and then sort of trying to reintegrate into a new program, and you're a fresh face to that program, and you're sort of starting all over. And then there's eventually, you know, the PhD, and then re-entering medical school, and then so there's just a lot of things that I don't know, I guess just transitions that for me have been one, I'm the kind of person who likes change, and I appreciate like the different changes, but also like I you know, I like to also get a little comfortable, and the stuff that I learn, I'd like to apply it. And so as an MD PhD, I think if any of you are thinking about it, it's you have to really be okay with, you've learned all these skill sets that are preparing you for the clinic in your first 2 years of medical school, but you're going to take a break from that and do a PhD, and you need to tackle that with the same amount of passion and motivation and consistency that you also had while doing the first 2 years of medical school. And that's kind of where I am right now. I'm sort of, you know, I've been re-energizing and repurposing that passion, trying to see how is this PhD going to impact healthcare? How is this PhD going to impact real lives at the end? And so, because that for me is why I'm doing it in the first place. And so it's fun, it's hard. I don't think anyone does an MD PhD because they think it's going to be easy. And you have to accept that it's going to be hard, and that it's okay. And hopefully through that, you are still passionate and excited about doing science, learning about medicine. And then the last thing I'll say, I'm just going all over the place here, but the last thing is I miss medical school. Like, I miss the people. I miss the conversations. I miss the clinic. And it's so great though that like I'm not too far from it. And so I can do things like this. I can interact with the faculty and staff, and I can once again sort of relive or live that medical school experience as much as I want during the PhD. So yeah, I'm enjoying it.
I'd say there are 3 main things that I am trying to work on that I will also pass on to you, because if you start working on them now, you're going to be good to go by the time you get to medical school. I think the first one is balance, trying to figure out, like, medical school is obviously my priority, but also making time for other things so that I have more energy and rest when it does come to studying, and giving myself breaks. And so how best to use that time. And I think finding people that are excited about the same things in medical school is really helpful, and then also outside of medical school as well. I'd also say that, oh man, I totally forgot what I was going to say.
You had 3 things.
I know, I had three things. Okay, first one is balance. Second one is finding people also that can support you and that you can reach out to for food and for distraction, as well as to help you with your drug list that you have to memorize. And then, man, I can't remember the last one, but those 2 I will leave with you. Yeah.
Come back for the next session.
Yeah, it's a cliffhanger. Yeah.
Thank you all. It's really good nuggets. I hope you all got something out of that. Thank you for being here. Take pizza.
We want to thank the students that are taking time out of their very busy schedule to share their experience. There were a lot of gems given out today that we appreciate. And to the faculty, the School of Medicine, for your time and in creating this event for and with us. And we're excited about our collaborations in the future. So big hand of thanks to all of you. Yes, take pizza.